Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with another video. So this video was actually inspired by the previous video I did going over some of the character designs for the Netflix Shira show. I had actually been working on this video about redemption arcs back in June, but like with many projects I have, it sort of went to the back burner, sort of fell by the wayside. But having completed that project last night, I thought that this would be a good project to revisit and to finish. So, as you can imagine, the redemption arc that I'm going to talk about or compare and contrast is, of course, Catra's redemption arc, or in my opinion, and in the opinions of others, such as the MJ Tanner twins, where this screen grab here comes from, the lack of a redemption arc that she had in season 5, which, in my opinion, made her redemption feel incredibly hollow and unearned. So, what I'm going to do is compare her redemption, if you want to call it that, to the redemption of another character, to the redemption arc of a character with similar circumstances to her in their own way. So, Catra, especially by critics, is often compared to Zuko from Avatar The Last Airbender, who, of course, has one of the best crafted, very nuanced character arcs in probably all of at least cartoon media in recent memory. However, it's not his redemption arc I'm going to compare Catra's to. It's actually the character of Gaara from Naruto. So this may sound like an odd comparison, an odd choice at first, right? What do Gaara and Catra have in common? Well, I would say that first of all, their penchant for the color red, right? There's that. Their moodiness, their at times disagreeable personalities. They both have a period where they're incredibly fearsome and feared and violent toward those ally and foe alike. Very, very powerful people, both of which have great destructive capability, have very, very messed up par- uh, relationships with their same-sex parent, right? Catra and Shadow Weaver, Gaara and his father, what's his name? Raza, something to that effect. And then, of course, how both of them had their lives changed forever by the blonde hero of their respective stories. But one of the major reasons that I chose to compare Catra to Gaara is because both of them are defined by love. Love is a theme with both of them in different ways. So I thought that it would be a good way to compare these two characters, focusing on the theme of love in particular, and how love motivated and changed both characters. So, first thing we have to ask is, well, what is love? If we're going to be talking about love and how love changed these two characters and how it impacted them, we have to know what love is. So, first I'm going to focus on Gaara, and I'm going to play a clip, a vocal clip of uh, the Sage's Reign video. Sage's Reign is this great channel, does a lot of character breakdowns and philosophical stuff. And I think he gives an amazing definition and explanation for what love is. So I'm going to get that ready. Give me a moment.
Above anything else, love must be selfless. Love is protection. Love is caring for someone else before caring for oneself. Love is healing. Love is growth. Love is acceptance. The Gaara that
So as we hear from Sage's Reign himself, Gaara is sorry, love, which of course Gaara eventually comes to express, is this self-sacrificing thing. It is a healing. It is putting others before oneself, right? Another definition of love, which in this case comes from Christian doctrine in the form of the Bible, comes from 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8, which reads, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Now, while this may come from a religious text and therefore might be viewed in a more religious or spiritual light, I do think that even uh, the more, I don't want to say secular love, but there are different types of love, right? There's familial love, there's platonic love, there is romantic love, right? And of course, agape, which is spiritual love. But regardless of which type of love you're talking about, I do think that this is a very good explanation of what love ideally should be and what love is, right? Patience, kindness, lack of envy, not boastful, not proud, not seeking to hurt or dishonor others, right? Uh, self self-sacrificing, right? All these ideals that we have toward the idea and the concept of love and how love should be expressed to our loved ones, right? So now that we've asked and hopefully answered the question of what is love, we now have to ask, what is redemption? And yes, I wrote the red part. My ability to center is atrocious. I apologize. But anyway, if you were to ask me, in my humble opinion, a redemption or a redemption arc, be it in a story or be it in real life, is a journey. It is the journey from destruction to redemption, from the lowest point in your life to hopefully the highest. It is humility. It is forgiveness. It is hard fought and hard earned. It is a restoration, a reunion. It puts what's fractured back together and is a, I would say, love story onto itself, even if it is not necessarily a romantic one. To me, redemption is restoration and healing. It is recovery. It is revealing who you always should have been. It creates a union or restores a union. It upbuilds and it rebuilds. It brings out the best in a person. It's growth. It's going from broken to restored. It is regaining what you lost: love, innocence, trust, whatever that may be. And it's getting what you always wanted, just in a different way. For example, Zuko wanted his honor, and he eventually gets his honor. But he gets his honor not by someone else granting it to him or restoring it to him. That, which he actually did experience in the show, was a false honor. He eventually learns that the only way to regain honor or to have honor is to be an honorable person, to do honorable things, which is what he does in the end. He does the right thing. He stands with Aang, and eventually, not only does he apologize to Uncle Iroh and regain his honor in showing humility, but he also ends up becoming the leader of his nation. Right? So, for those who are unfamiliar with the character of Gaara, I'm going to try to give a quick summary, as quick as a summary as can be given for a character like him. So, Gaara, according to the Wikia for Naruto, is a shinobi, so that's a ninja, of Sunagakure, or the village hidden in the sand village. He was made the Jinchuriki of the one-tailed Shukaku before he was born. So for those who may not be familiar with the work, basically mystical, powerful, scary monster trapped inside this boy's body, right? Before he was born, causing the villagers of Suna to fear him as a monster. With nobody to connect to, Gaara grew up hating the world and looking out only for himself, giving his life meaning by killing anyone he came across. After being defeated by Naruto Uzumaki, the hero of the story, a Jinchuriki like himself who found strength in his friendships, Gaara starts emulating him. He becomes Suna's fifth Kazekage, meaning fifth wind shadow, in other words, the leader of his village, so that he can protect the village and all those who live there, dispelling the fears that he casts on the villagers. And it goes on a little bit more. There's a lot of here. There's a lot in this section, and I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to try to highlight the most important and pertinent points. Gaara's background is very similar to that of Naruto Uzumaki. Both have been Jinchuriki since the day they were born. Both were hated by almost everyone in their village, and both were raised without a parent's love. But whereas Gaara eventually gave up on other people, Naruto continued to try to win the acknowledgement of his peers and his village. Whereas Gaara seeks strength only to protect himself, Naruto seeks strength to protect the friends he makes. When the two fight during the Konoha Crush and Naruto defeats Gaara, Gaara takes this, and I want to focus on this part. Gaara takes this as proof that his own choices in life were wrong, that he had surrendered to his difficult circumstances too easily. From that point onward, he starts moving away from Gaara of the Sand Waterfall and starts emulating Naruto instead, improving his relationships with his siblings, making friends within Suna, so his homeland, and without, finding something that he's willing to give his life to protect. And then it states later that Gaara becomes Suna's Kazekage by the start of part 2, signaling the success of his emulation of Naruto. Right, and then later on it mentions that although, let's see here, I'm trying to find it. Gaara gains a new purpose in life by dedicating all his energy towards serving the village and those who live there. Right? It says although he retains some detractors, most of the villagers adore him and will do what they can to help him reform Suna and the rest of the world. And it said that this reform in him is very much inspired by Naruto. Right, and it states later on in this that despite his history of cruelty and young age, during his ascent to Kazekage, Gaara attains the love of his people by showcasing, and I want to highlight this, his idealism, compassion, and willingness to reform himself. And of course, this is what also allows him, as it's mentioned down here, to later become leader of the allied shinobi forces. Right, so we see that Gaara's running with Naruto and being defeated by him triggers a life-changing change of mindset in his life, and he goes on to give himself a new meaning, a new purpose in life, which is to not only become a leader for his village, but to live for them, to live to protect others. Now I want to explain why Gaara's redemption works. First of all, he was given a sympathetic, blameless backstory, one which demonstrated that he was never truly evil. We see that when he was a young child, he was scared and overpowered, but he didn't understand why people feared him or why he unintentionally hurt others. All he knew was that people didn't like him and people feared him and he was alone. There's actually a very touching moment when his uncle tries to explain the concept of pain to him. And Gaara's never known physical pain because the sand protects him, but he does know the agony in his heart. And his uncle Yashimaru explains to him that the only thing that can cure the pain in his heart is love. And we even see that when he was younger, Gaara did try to apologize and make it up to, I should say, the people that he hurt unintentionally by trying to bring them ointment and whatnot. His backstory shows that he's as much of a victim as the people he unintentionally victimized. So it makes it a lot easier to believe in his redemption because we know that he was never truly evil. He was just scared and alone, and his circumstances warped him into the person he was when he was introduced in the story. Number 2, his redemption starts very early in the story. Now this is important because it gives plenty of time throughout the course of the story to show his change, to show his growth and his redemption. It allows for that journey, for that process to happen. It gives it room to exist, room to occur, room to breathe. We get to see how he actually does change as the story goes on. Plus, even in story, his redemption starts when he's a very young man, around 12, 13 years old. By the time he's introduced as an adult in, say, Boruto, when he's in his early 30s or around there, and he has a son of his own, you know that he's literally been changing for the past 20 some years of his life almost. So having his redemption start early really helps actually tell the tale of his change, and we get to see that, hey, it sticks. He actually goes through these challenges, and he's up and downs, and that his change in mindset is not just a win, and it's not just because of Naruto's influence. That actually sticks well beyond and past him. 3. Gaara's worldview is defeated by the hero, which of course, having that conflict, having the hero of the story face his shadow archetype, not only establishes the fact that Naruto's way, right, fighting for his friends, is the right thing, but it also gives Gaara the impetus that he needs. It shows him that he was wrong. When he loses that fight, he didn't just simply lose a fight against an opponent. He lost his reason for being at that point, or rather, he lost what he thought was why he existed. Because if he exists only to fight others and to kill them to affirm his own existence, if he loses, then what does he have? So it completely shatters his worldview. It was challenged and it lost. So now he has to confront this and realize that there is another way. Because if he could be defeated by someone who is basically his equal, maybe he was wrong all along. And then we see his first sincere act of goodness, which is after his defeat, he sincerely apologizes to his siblings and apologizes for how he's been treating them at that point, which is not exactly like a good little brother, to say the least. Right? This shows his humility, and it also allows him to establish new goals, which of course is to become the leader of his nation. We also see that he is willing to work hard toward his new goals. Even the part that I read earlier noted that part of the reason why his people come to believe in him is his willingness to change. And in fact, one of the big major moments of his being Kazekage is when he fights and unfortunately loses, but he fights to protect his village. And actually, that act of trying to defend his people is what actually ends up costing him his life until he's resurrected, because this is anime. And then, of course, we have the attainment of his goals and beyond. He doesn't just become the leader, the Kazekage of his people. He also ends up becoming a world leader, right? The leader of a certain regiment of the uh, Allied shinobi forces. And towards the end of the story, going into Boruto, we see that he becomes a father. So he truly becomes, or rather say, takes on the roles that his own father had, but on an even grander scale. And going into that is the seventh point, which is the completion of his redemption arc. His story has put Gaara in his father's shoes, in his father's place. In particular, when he encounters the young boy Shinki, who is very much like himself when he was young, dangerous, violent, but ultimately scared and confused. And we get to see how much Gaara has changed in this, because he's able to calm Shinki down by walking into the literal sandstorm that the boy is creating and giving him a hug. Out of all the things Gaara could have done to stop this boy from being a terror to his village, he decides on an act of love, an expression of love and kindness, instead of the, I guess you could say, pain that his father had inflicted upon him. Gaara, of course, goes on to adopt this young boy, but still, we get to see now that Gaara has become the positive version, the good guy version of his father. He has not followed, well, he has followed in his father's footsteps in some ways, being the leader of the village. But when it comes to interacting with others, in particular with dangerous individuals, he chooses the path of love and compassion as opposed to simply viewing a powerful person as a weapon, as his father did. So now, and here's the most important part, right? Which is Gaara's change. He starts out incredibly selfish, right? Thinking that you love only yourself and you fight for yourself and you win for yourself, and he kills for no other reason than to affirm his own existence. But he goes from that to the same to the person, I should say, who's willing to fight for and protect and die for not only his friends, not only his family, not only his village, but the world that he lives in. He went from selfish to incredibly selfless. And now we have Catra, right? It says here that Catra is the deuteragonist. I never know how you say that word, but she's basically the second lead and a former antagonist. By starting out as a cadet in the Horde, Catra was soon promoted to the rank of Force Captain and eventually served as Hordak's second in command. After the invasion of the Galactic Horde, Catra briefly served as an agent of Horde Prime. After her reform, she became Adora's girlfriend. So let's examine this a little bit more. And I'm pulling this from the Wikia about the show, right? The Wikia that is written by fans for fans. So don't get mad at me. It's what the Wikia says. It says here that, and this is of course a little later on in the Wikia, ultimately, Catra cast aside her friendship in favor, of course, her friendship with Adora, to be clear here. Her friendship in favor for her newfound strengths and achievements, basking in the glory she has attained without Adora's aid. Catra becomes the new Force Captain in place of Adora. However, Catra's rage, anger, and sadness begin to weigh heavily on her despite achieving multiple military victories over the Princess Alliance. Thanks to the psychoanalysis of the treacherous Double Trouble, she becomes dejected with herself and confronted her own inner struggles and questioned her motivations. In Season 5, Catra finally accepts that the choices she made and the people she hurt had destroyed her, and that her own ruthless ambition was just hiding the pain she felt in wanting to be accepted by others. She redeems herself and renews her friendship with Adora, fights for the rebellion, and joins the best friend squad. In the series finale, she confesses her love to Adora and they enter a romantic relationship. So I went through the episode summaries for most of the episodes for season 5 to pick out some moments where I would say Catra shows her hand. Catra shows what's truly motivating her in her actions. So let's see. Right, so we have here, it's talking about Catra here, right? So there's a lot of stuff here, but I'm going to focus on this sentence here. She, being Catra, freed Glimmer from her cell and led her to the transport pad, told her to escape with Adora and not return. She then contacted Adora and told her where she was going to send Glimmer and demanded that Adora not go to Prime's ship, this of course being Horde Prime, who's like the big baddie of the show, to leave her behind and beam the Queen, that being Glimmer, off Prime's ship. She screamed an apology at Adora before she was overcome by clones. Okay, so number 1, she screams an apology at Adora, right, in a moment of desperation as she's being overcome by clones. Now we have a second one. Meanwhile, as Catra rides on Malog's back, Malog suddenly halts and sends Catra flying. Catra becomes enraged and declares that she won't go back. For those who may not know, at this point, Catra had left Horde Prime. She had defected and she'd become part of Adora's best friend squad team, but now she's having a crisis of faith, as it were. And now she's running away. At which point, Malog simply sits on her and pins her down, prompting, and I want to focus on this part, prompting Catra to launch into an angry tirade about how Adora supposedly chose Shadow Weaver over her. Although she insists Adora doesn't want her, she eventually admits to Maylog. Maylog is her, like, battle cat, for lack of a better term, that Adora actually just doesn't have romantic feelings for her. So again, you have the first one being that she shouts an apology to Adora. Now we're seeing that she's running away because she believes Adora chose Shadow Weaver over her, and she's frustrated over the fact that she's of the opinion that Adora is not in love with her. And now we have another one, right? This is a quote. Now keep in mind it says Catra under mind control, but it does seem to be the type of mind control that reveals your innermost thoughts and drives and desires. It says, Prime has given me peace, something you could never do. You broke my heart, but he has made it whole again. Don't you see? This is for the best. I'm happy here. You could be happy too. And then, of course, the big declaration of love at the very end of the show. Don't you get it? I love you. I always have. So please, just this once, stay. Right? And then we have Adora saying, You you love me? Catra responding with, You're such an idiot. And Adora saying, I love you too. So you see a pattern here? You see a pattern here? Catra was motivated by one thing and one thing only, which I will get to, which is her love and her desire for Adora. But I will get to that in a moment. Here's why Catra's redemption does not work. Her backstory shows that she was troubled from the start. For those who don't know about her backstory, she's shown to have been raised with the others, Adora, Lonnie, several other characters, Scorpia, and many others, raised as a Horde soldier, in particular raised by the sorceress Shadow Weaver. In fact, Catra and Adora were basically raised as Shadow Weaver's daughter, so you can say that they grew up like siblings. Right? But even in the earliest of her backstory, the earliest moments of her backstory, she is shown to be physically violent, constantly pushing Adora around, constantly jumping on her. She scratched out one girl's eye. I think it was Octavia. Scratched out her eye, so she was shown to be violent and troubled from the start. Now some may say, well, she was raised in an abusive environment. Shadow Weaver. Yes, it's true that she was raised in a very abusive environment, as was Adora, as was Octavia, as was Lonnie, as was the Lizard Boy, as was Kyle, as was Scorpia, and everybody else. Yet none of them are shown to be as prone to violence and prone to just responding to everything with violence the way she does. So it shows that she's troubled from the start. And while this can be overcome if you actually show the person consistently working on their flaws, if you're going to try to tell a redemption story, it can be very difficult to start off from the premise of, well, they're always kind of messed up in the head and violent, right? Especially if you're not going to dedicate enough time to show the character realizing that they have these very serious issues and flaws and actually making a sincere, prolonged effort to deal with these issues. If you want a character to come across sympathetically, it's actually better oftentimes to give them a sympathetic backstory, like with Gaara, right? He had no control over his abilities. He was blameless in the sense that he never intended anybody harm and he had no way to control his powers. He was as much a victim as the people he hurt. Here, though, Catra, especially growing up in a military complex, does have control. She does have agency. She just doesn't use it, especially as she gets older, right? So still, a very unsympathetic backstory makes it really hard to redeem a character later. Not impossible, but very difficult. Number two, her redemption starts at the very end of the story, which is not a good idea. Because then you have to rush the redemption arc and you cannot give it the space it needs to grow and to breathe and to give her enough moments of doing good things, of making the right choices, to justify in a viewer's mind that, hey, she really has changed. She actually is confronting her issues. She actually is making up for the pain that she caused others. Most of Catra's redemption is her either being conflicted over Adora's feelings toward her, or hastily apologizing to certain characters, like Scorpio. And as many people have noted in videos such as the reviews Crimson Sin, dear God, I'm getting hiccups at the worst time. But as mentioned in the videos that were made by Crimson Sin and MJ Tanner and others, she doesn't actually apologize to Glimmer for the, let's say, disappearance of Glimmer's mother, Queen Angela. And this is a big deal because Catra tried to destroy the world at the end of season 3, and Queen Angela sacrificed herself and is basically KIA because of what Catra did. So you might kind of want to sort of have her apologize for, you know, killing, more or less, killing the girl's mother. But that never actually happens. Number 3, Catra's worldview is never truly challenged or confronted. One, because she never truly has a definitive fight with Adora, right? They have confrontations, but they don't have, a knockdown, drag out fight or battle that firmly establishes a winner and a loser. And like I mentioned with Gaara, right, when he lost, it wasn't just losing a fight. He also lost the very reasoning for why he viewed existence in the way that he did. Catra never really gets that, at least not from Adora. The closest thing she has from it is, as was mentioned earlier, when Double Trouble probably does the one good thing he could ever, or they, I should say, could ever do in this series, is that he reads, sorry, they read uh, Catra like a book, and reveal that Catra's stated motivations of power and ambition are really just hollow, and that what she's suffering from is basically a broken heart, more or less, and that she's just not being honest with herself about what she truly wants, which is, of course, Adora. So, I won't give Double Trouble that much. Thank you. You finally told her what everybody else needed to tell her ages ago. Now, number 4, sincere act of goodness. Whereas Gaara's sincere act of goodness was showing humility in defeat and apologizing to his siblings for the way he had treated them previously, Catra's sincere act of goodness is motivated by desperation, right? When she transports Glimmer and she shouts, Adora, I'm sorry for everything, right? This would actually not be bad in and of itself if it were the beginning, if we're at the beginning of the redemption arc, right? And if the redemption arc has started earlier. Sometimes you do need an act of desperation. You do have to be put up against the wall, right, to actually take action on something. But when you combine the other issues that her redemption arc has, having Catra's first act of goodness be an act of desperation doesn't really help with the redemption arc, because it begs the question of, if she had not been pushed into this desperate situation, would she have taken this action? Would she have actually tried to help? Right? Number 5, Catra's redemption, as I demonstrated with the earlier quotes, is motivated by very personal and ultimately, in a way, selfish desires, wanting Adora's love. Everything she does is motivated in one way, or I say everything she does in season 5, I should say, is motivated either by Adora, right, wanting her affection, or thinking she doesn't have Adora's love and affection, right? She flip flops, all depending on how she personally feels. She isn't willing to put her personal feelings aside for the greater good. As we saw, she left the group the moment that she felt that Adora had chosen someone else over her. It's all about what Catra wants in the end. Catra wants Adora. That's in fact part of the reason why she, has that declaration of love, because she's in love with Adora and she wants her, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Because I know some people are going to say, "Well, are you saying that love cannot redeem, or that you're being, bad and selfish if part of the reason why you want to change is because you have fallen in love?" No. My favorite film is Beauty and the Beast, right? The whole end sequence is literally love resurrecting the beast. I am not saying that wanting a person's love in and of itself is a bad thing. Falling in love has changed many of people's lives. And in Beauty and the Beast itself, falling in love is what gives the beast the impetus to turn his life around. But you have to remember that the beast also showed that he was willing to give, he was willing to sacrifice, he was willing to lose. Because remember, right after the big dance, right after the big dance when they're drunk on love, what happens? Belle uses the magic mirror. She finds out that her father, more, more, Jesus Christ, Maurice, there we go, is cold, in the snow, sick, dying. And as she says, he's sick and dying and he's all alone. And the beast immediately makes the decision to let her go because he knows that Belle's happiness is more important than his own. Which is why it was so important for him to say that in the film instead of the stupid remake, which had Mrs. Potts say it, but that's a video for another day. But to be clear, no, I'm not saying that wanting a person's love in and of itself is a bad thing, is a bad motivator. The problem is that when you are flip-floppy on the issue solely because it's about what you want. If I don't get Adora's love, if I feel that she's chosen Shadow Weaver over someone else, I leave. If I have Adora's love, I stay. That's not how love works. But anyway, moving on. Number 6, she continues to be emotionally manipulative and abusive toward Adora. You can just see all of season 5. Again, the flip-floppiness. And you can look over the entire rest of the show too. Attainment of goals. She got a girlfriend. That was it. That was her end goal. She got Adora. Her end goal wasn't to save the world. It wasn't to die a heroic death. It wasn't to bring Queen Angela back. It wasn't to try to make up for all the pain she had caused. It was to get back into Adora's life. And she got it. I just wish that her goals had been a bit broader in view. Now some may say, well, she helped save the world. No, no, no. Adora saved the world. Catra tried to destroy the world. Adora saved it. Okay? Catra's goal was never about helping until Adora got involved. And then we have finally the completion of her redemption arc, which is an unearned happy ending because of the first 7 points and many more that I mentioned, right? I think that the best way to highlight the ultimate ending or the aftermath of these two arcs is to use clips from their shows. So I'm going to start with Gaara. I'm going to play a clip from a speech that he gives towards the end of Naruto when he's trying to rally the troops and get them to put their long-standing grievances and differences behind them. One moment, please.
In the past, I was hatred and power and a Jinchuriki. I hated this world and all its people and thought about destroying both. But then, a single shinobi from the Hidden Leaf Village stopped me. Terrible is I was his enemy, yet still he cried for me. And he called me his friend, even though we had battled. He saved me. We were on different sides, but we were both Jinchuriki. Between those who have experienced the same pain, there can be no hate!
So that's Gaara, right? Gaara explaining how he used to be and the moment in his life where he changed, explaining that although he and Naruto had been on opposite sides of a conflict, Naruto had still shown him compassion, as Gaara states. He cried for me. Even though we were enemies and we had battled, he cried for me. So now, let's look at Catra, right? What's motivating Catra? What caused Catra to change?
Dora chose Shadow Weaver, okay? Not me! Dora doesn't want me! Not like I want her.
Oh, bro.
And there we go, right? Catra's motivations are made clear. If she thinks that Adora doesn't want her, she leaves. If she thinks Adora wants her or will have her, she stays. One had a motivation that changed his life. One is motivated by whether or not her girlfriend is happy with her at this particular moment. So there we go. I hope that I have made a good case for why Gaara's redemption arc was well done, and why Catra's was not so well done. Now, I know that especially people who maybe are more critical of me when I cover this topic, or fans of the show, are going to think that I hate the show and I hate Catra. I don't, and I don't. I actually feel bad for the show because I think it could have been well done. Even keeping with all of the LGBTQ themes and representation and all that, I just think that with a lot more work, a lot more care, and an understanding of how to tell a story, you could have had a story of redemption with Catra. And she still could have ended up with her Belle in the end, as it were, right? She could have been the beast who was emotionally conflicted and who could have come to experience a, a redeeming love story and get the beautiful belle of the ball at the end. There's nothing wrong with that. But it has to be more than that. If you're going to tell a redemption tale that is not strictly a love story, right? It's one thing if the whole point of the story is to be a love story. That's different. But if the love story going on is only a part of the many other stories going on, then this redemption, right? It needs to be about more than just getting the. It has to be more about just getting what you want. It has to be about more than just getting your waifu, right? You have to show that you're willing to apologize, willing to make up for what you did, willing to sacrifice, willing to acknowledge you were wrong, willing to change. And I'm sorry, but Noelle Stevenson and her crew did not, in my opinion, do a very convincing job of that. They were so focused on shipping, they forgot to build up to the ship. Speaking of shipping, speaking of shipping, I want to show something again from the wiki. From the wiki. Written for fans by fans. Right, it says here, this section showing Shadow Weaver just before she dies, it says here that as Adora arrives, Shadow Weaver removes her mask and looks on at the two girls she practically raised as daughters. I want to emphasize that. The two girls she practically raised as daughters. The two girls she practically raised as daughters end up doing this. And on top of that, as we see in the future, apparently Catra's wearing Adora's clothes. Now I wonder why that might be. Could this and this be connected? I don't know. But there are some who would say that such a relationship, right? Two girls who, while maybe not blood related, who were raised together as siblings and who now go on to have a romantic relationship kind of sort of is this thing called problematic. I'm just saying. This relationship's always had a whole comic books comic book issue of issues, right? But in the end, regardless of what type of relationship they have or what type of relationship you find yourself in, remember this. When someone brings more problems into your life than happiness, it's time to show them the door where they can exit. But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all the next one. See you around. Bye.